how does the system collapse? I'd like to explain why using a report that I saw referred to in a BBC news article. Now, as you'll know, if you've seen other videos I've done, I think this matters. This is important because I think that most of the problems that we face under the current setup, these are not going to, particularly the fundamental problem of invasion, these are not going to be solved through government action. They're going to be solved through the collapse of the state. And this is something that I think is built into the architecture of the system. When you have a welfare democracy in a very unequal society, you will get a constant pressure for more tax and spend, because most voters will have a financial incentive. They will do well. We will financially gain from more tax and spend because somebody else pays for it. And as a result of that, the tax and spend ratchet will keep clicking. It will keep turning. And then eventually that will collapse the economy, that will collapse the system. So that basically where you have a state system, you will eventually get a democratic state. Where you have a democratic state, you will eventually get a welfare state, and then the welfare will collapse the state. I don't think it will necessarily collapse democracy, but I think it will collapse the state. To that end, I think we are living at the end of the age of the state. And then I think we will be able to deal by acting collectively, individually. Then I think we'll be able to deal with the problems that face us. Okay, so what's that report? Here it is. That's from a week ago on the BBC. Tory think tank Bright Blue calls for minimum income. A Conservative think tank has said the welfare system is not providing enough support for people and has called for the introduction of a minimum income. That means more money, more payouts. Bright Blue, backed by some senior Tory MPs, says households need a minimum income to meet the cost of living. Former Work and Pensions Secretary Stephen Crabb said the welfare system has significant gaps and weaknesses, gaps to be plugged by more spending. Now, this struck me as being surprising that an influential and apparently very well-funded, well-connected Conservative think tank is calling for more spending, more unfunded government spending so soon, 4 months after the debacle of the Liz Truss proposed tax cuts. There's the Wikipedia page for the September 2022 United Kingdom mini budget. What I want to go through is the figures there, just to show you you'll see why this is relevant in a minute. The money that was involved in the tax cuts sounds like a lot of money to me, but in the scheme of things wasn't that big and can easily be eaten up by the extra spending that's proposed by this new report. Now, here's the table, the major major measures by cost over the 5 years that were proposed under Kwasi Kwarteng's budget in the end of September 2022. There are a couple of things there which preceded his budget and continued afterwards and were always going to. That was the energy bill support, that was £60 billion, and the cost of living support, that was £15 billion. But if you add up all the other items, that to me, I mean, just sort of thumbnail arithmetic, that comes to me to be somewhere in the region of about maybe 180 billion over 5 years. I guess that's something like maybe 35 to 40 billion a year. Again, that's a lot of money, but a small amount compared to what's proposed, I think, would be proposed under this by this think tank. Okay, so this think tank, they're called Bright Blue. I'd never heard of them, but they're well connected. They seem to be well funded, and they've got a lot of connections with a lot of MPs. MPs want to be in this organisation's good books. Defending and improving liberal society. They're on the liberal wing of the Tory party. They go on about green policies, about multiculturalism and anti-racism and making the welfare system work, etc., etc. So they're on the liberal. What it shows is there aren't really political parties study. They're not competing through policies. They're not trying to push through different programs. They all find that welfare is really good for them, for increasing their power. The more dependent it makes us, then the more power they have. So they're all basically proposing the same thing. It's no longer different parties. It is different people jostling for position, shouldering each other to get their 5 fat fingers on the lever of power. So who are these? So the people who are in this pressure group, Bright Blue, there they are about us. That's the team, the people who run it. A bit strange to me. I mean, some of them look quite normal, but in general, they look like I would say they look like the trophy wall or the runners-up to the trophy wall of the rogue doctor in the cousin marriage section of the genetics department at your local hospital. So I wouldn't want to trust them with my money. Some of them might be financial whiz kids, I don't know, but they look a bit strange to me. All right, but they are well connected, and this is their website. They go on about this. So I'll go back to that fella, Tom Tugendhat. I can't bear him, but he's well connected. He was in the leadership contest. Michael Gove, I think he was in the leadership contest as well, and someone or other. And then this fella, Baldy, what's his name? I think he was Chancellor of the Exchequer. So they have some big names on their books. And if you go down, you see they've got a list of MPs there. It comes to 212 in total. Some of them are Lords. I would say that's about 200 of those are MPs, and a lot of names that I recognise. Your MP might be amongst that number. That is a lot of political support, as well as the funding they have to pay all these people's salaries. So I reckon they're well funded, well connected. They've got a lot of clout. And their report, Building Up the Future of Social Security. That's their report, 225 pages. I'm not going to read the whole of it. I'm not going to try and summarise the whole of that to you now. Fortunately, they gave a kind of summary page here on this tab. Bright Blue, welfare system not providing enough adequate, accessible and fair support, from January 16th, about a week ago, a bit less than a week ago. Bright Blue, the independent think tank for liberal conservatism, has today released a new report entitled Building Up the Future of Social Security, which examines the adequacy, accessibility and fairness of the social security system for working age adults before, during and after the pandemic. Now, to sum it up, they refer to 3 things: the adequacy of the system, i.e. not enough money is getting paid, and then the accessibility, not enough people are claiming what they're entitled to, and then the fairness of the system, i.e. creates a level of higher payouts if you pay in more money. Now, all of this is going to would sharply increase payouts, money coming out of the system. And I think this is telling, given that it comes so fast on the Liz Truss tax cuts, the quasi-quatrain tax cuts of September 2022, which ended so badly. I mean, just to outline that, what happened was quasi-quatrain and Liz Truss said they were going to cut all kinds of tax, corporation tax, abolish the high rate of income tax, and cut income tax as well, and cut national insurance. The idea being to kickstart the economy. What they didn't say is how those tax cuts would be paid for. They basically said it would be paid for by government borrowing. The result was that people who then lend to the British government said, we don't want to lend to an insolvent creditor. We don't want to have to lend more money. If we're going to lend to you, we want higher interest. You're a bigger risk. We want higher interest payments. And the value of British government bonds went down. And that then hit the pension funds, because the pension funds invest heavily in government bonds, and because government has pumped so much money into the economy in order to try to create maximum permanent economic boom by keeping interest rates as low as possible, making money as easy as possible to borrow, so you get economic boom, so that tax take is always maximised, so that they can then pay for all these tax and spend things that we vote for. As a result of that, the money that pension funds can make on their bonds, the interest they get on them, was too low for the payouts that those pension funds had to make. So they had to start gambling on the value of those bonds. They had to start leveraging their investments in those bonds. And that works out okay, but what it means is when the system goes wonky, as it did under Liz Truss, then those pension funds have substantial losses. And what they then had to do was to sell government bonds in order to be able to meet their payouts. So what you got was what was called a death spiral, where the value of government bonds was falling, And so those pension funds had to sell more government bonds in order to meet the payouts they had to make, which crushed the price of government bonds further and meant that the pension funds were having to sell more bonds. And the result was that it was reported that 90% of UK pension funds were facing insolvency, going broke, not being able to pay out any money within a few days, within about a week, I think. And that then would have had a knock-on effect. The banks that they'd made those bets with would have been left holding the bag. Some of those bags would then have become insolvent, and then you'd have had the domino effect. And the financial sector could easily have fallen over. The economy could have just collapsed there and then. And then the government would have had to come in and print a load of money to get us out of it. It could have been a disaster. The point of the Liz Truss debacle, it wasn't so much her fault. It was the fact that what it illustrated was that the UK economy is in a very precarious situation. A relatively small change, it's a lot of money to me, but it's, in the scheme of things, a relatively small change to the tax system really was going to push over the whole economy. And that shows, I think that shows that the UK economy is on something of a knife edge. It doesn't take much to push it over completely. And so now what you have is this group saying, hey guys, it's only 4 months, we're over that now, that crisis, forget about that, let's start spending more money on welfare. I'm not saying welfare is a bad thing, I'm not saying it shouldn't have more money spent on it, I'm simply looking at the affordability, whether it will collapse the economy. I want to show how that financial collapse, the collapse of the system, happens. So if I go here back to this organisation, what they were advocating, this bright blue organisation, as regards the welfare system, they were looking at three things. The first was the adequacy of the system, and they were saying that basically they want to pay out more money, establishing a new minimum living income which will be proposed by a reformed and expanded Social Security Advisory Committee, which will also recommend the levels and rating, that means paying out more money, of different social security payments to help low-income households meet the minimum living income, in quotes. Don't know why they put that in quotes. That means they're a bit embarrassed by it, I think. Then the next one is accessibility, and that means that people who are entitled to it are not claiming it. This is preying on our naivety, because most of us think that if you are entitled to claim a benefit and you don't claim it 1 year, and then the next year you're entitled to claim it and you do claim it, that there is no change in public spending. No, if more people claim something, that is more money getting paid out. And what they're asking for is for more people to claim. They're not saying, they don't, so far as I can tell, they don't anywhere in their 225 pages of their report, they don't say how it's going to be funded. They say that people are sceptical about the affordability and the government will have to set up a funding settlement, whatever that is. Okay, and the final one is fairness. What fairness means to them is what they're saying is create a new higher level and time-limited contribution element in universal credit, which is paid out to those who have paid a new additional voluntary national insurance unemployment supplement. So basically what they're saying is make it like a state-run insurance policy. You can pay them more, that means you get more out if you're made unemployed. Well, that won't work. The reason I know it won't work is because that's what the national insurance system was always intended to be. You pay in your national insurance stamp, and then that's a state-run insurance system. If you get made unemployed, you can then get paid out from that, paid from that insurance system. It has never worked like that. It has never funded itself. There's no pretense of that today. Today, national insurance isn't about a fund to pay for the welfare system. It simply just goes into general coffers, is part of general tax take, and the welfare system is unfunded. It's just paid out from year to year. There is no fund. There is no welfare pot. So I don't think this will work at all. What I think would happen with that system is that people would, if people were foolish enough to trust it, which I don't think we would be actually, but if people were foolish enough to trust it, the government would simply say, great, our books look better, we've had all this extra money coming in, now we can pay for those things that we've wanted to pay for all these years and haven't been able to afford to, and they would do that, and then when the bill came due for this increased welfare payout, that they had to make, then suddenly they would have to borrow more money to pay for that. There would be an emergency. That is how the tax and spend ratchet works. But this, in case you think this is just eccentric policy nerds coming up with nonsense, no. The key thing is it's not only supported by MPs. I think MPs know that the more they can make us dependent, the more power they have. They all know that. So there's no real distinction between the parties. They are just jostling for position by making promises to us about what they will give us. That is what they're doing. Their job, they have power, they want more of it. That's what their job is. Now, but that it is ultimately, although they bear a special responsibility, the ultimate responsibility is with us. It comes from us. They know they can exploit us, particularly our wish to get free things. And when they talk about adequacy, wanting higher welfare payments, they stress that this is supported by the public. The majority of the UK public support the idea that social security should be meeting the cost of living. 72% of the public cited this. This includes a majority of Conservative, 68%, Labour, 83%, and Liberal Democrat voters, 80%. The UK public is strongly in favour of almost all claimant groups receiving more financial support through the social security system, i.e. more money coming out. Notably, those with long-term health problems and their carers, 77% of the public want more money for them. Low-income working parents, 69% of the public want more income for them, and according to this report. And low-income workers who start their own businesses, 63% of the public want more welfare for them. And then thirdly, a high proportion of the UK public thought a typical benefit claimant received insufficient support, i.e. not enough money during the pandemic for a range of everyday costs. So I don't think those figures are phony. I think those figures are probably more or less genuine. They may be fudged a bit, but we want that. We support it. Now, the reason we do it's built into the architecture of the system. Democracy leads to welfare democracy, and the welfare then collapses the state. And in an unequal society, it becomes a profitable financial calculation to have more, for most people, to have more tax and spend. If I can explain this, if I go to the next tab, this is an article here from 2017. It just shows where the tax take is coming from. Reality check our lower earners bearing the tax burden. That's from the Beeb, and that graph there, that shows income tax contributions from the top 50% of taxpayers. If I zoom that out here, just to show you, so it's easy to read, income tax contributions of the top 50% of taxpayers. Income tax is a fairly good guide because other taxes are more unequally distributed and other taxes are more evenly distributed. So it is a pretty good guide as to how total tax take is distributed. And now that pale green one there, this is 2015 to 16, and you notice it's that line is going up and up and up over time. The pale green section there, that's the top 1%, and that says that the top 1% pay, I would say, about 29%, 29% of total income tax coming from the top 1%. Now the pale green and the mid-green bit, that's the top 10%, and you see the top 10% there, to my eye, they pay 60% of total income tax receipts, 59 or 60%. And then the pale green, mid-green and dark green bit, that's the top 50%, they pay 90% of all income tax receipts. So what that means is there is basically a 9 to, whichever way you look at it, there is a 9 to 1 majority who have an incentive to receive, for there to be more tax and spend. So 9 out of 10 of us get more than we put in to the tax and spend ratchet. That explains why that tax and spend ratchet only goes up one way. In an unequal society, the majority of people will have an incentive to vote, will always have an incentive to vote for more tax and spend. There'll be more and more pressure for more tax and spend, and politicians will respond to that. And this report here, hold on, let me bring it up. That report there, Building Up the Future of Social Security from the Bright Blue Foundation, that is a symptom of that. That constant pressure, it needs to be filtered through to government, and that is what that think tank are doing. They say they're after the Liz Truss tax cut debacle of September 22. They should be you'd have thought they'd be finding ways to reassure the public, reassure the markets about the affordability of the system. No, they're doing the opposite. They're saying, great news, everything's stable now, we can get on with spending more money. This is how we, the Tory party, can meet the public's demand for more tax and spend, and here's an intellectual way of laundering that idea. Paying for it is not addressed. The way governments like to pay for it is the way they really like to pay for it is by forcing economic boom, by cutting interest rates lower and lower, by pumping more and more money into the economy to try to maximise tax take so they can pay for things that way. And then you get like the financial crisis of 2008 and the financial crisis that's coming now, and the debt bubble that we have now, which will collapse the system. Now, I have no illusions that none of us should have any illusions about about economic collapse and political collapse and the breakdown of the state being a good thing or a nice thing. I think that economic collapse will cause the breakdown of the state, because we see the state as not being there in order to create order. We see it as the vehicle for payments to us, welfare payments, giving us things that we want, free things that we like. When that stops happening, when it completely ends, when hospitals shut their door, there's no more rent subsidy, no more welfare payment, the housing office has been set on fire because it's not sending out any checks, then I think the state simply loses all its authority because it can't meet any of its promises, and the state breaks down. I don't think that's a nice thing. I think that will create terrible dislocation, i.e. deaths and people dying. But I think in the longer term, it will lead to a much better system that can solve the problems that we face. In particular, the problems of, or including what I think is the underlying fundamental problem of invasion, multicultural invasion. I think that multicultural invasion is something that those that be want, because it's about getting more power. In the same way that getting us dependent on welfare, getting us dependent on the state increases their power. It's been said that people who turn to the state won't turn on the state. Grinding people down, grinding us down, taking away our sense of identity, dividing us from each other, degrading the conditions and neighbourhoods that we live in. That again makes us more dependent, and that increases the power of those who rule us. So I think that is why they're going to continue pushing the multicultural invasion, mass immigration. Once the state breaks down, then I think we'll have it in our hands to solve that problem. What I think we are facing is a situation where the state breaks down, it won't be able to get up again, because the only reason for it to get up again will be in order to make the welfare promises again that it's always made, and it won't be able to do that if the system has collapsed. It won't be able to justify itself the way it justifies itself at the moment. I think what we will see then is people meeting. We will meet our primal need for law by turning to opt-in, opt-out systems of law that we vote for with our feet, driven by the need for security, the need to be able to earn a living, the need to be trusted by other people so that we can make a crust and survive. And when that happens, when we then have to make those individual choices, we will do it on a much more hard-headed basis. In those circumstances, I think that a society will settle out along very hard, strict and restrictive ethnic lines. No one with a brain in their head will join a system which allows mass immigration multiculturalism within it, because to do so will mean paying more money in order to live in a society, a neighbourhood, a system which is more poverty-stricken, more degraded and much more crime-ridden, as multicultural societies have been, as our society is, as a result of mass immigration. No one wants to pay more money to be subject to that. So I think we will see an earthquake followed by a landslide in public attitudes, and I think society will separate out along ethnic lines, and the foreigner areas will experience plummeting conditions of life, and they will then become quite amenable to returning to their much loved homelands, perhaps getting bought out, getting their areas, their land bought out by businessmen. And then I think that is how we're going to reverse the mass immigration multicultural policy, and that is how I think we're going to accomplish the mass pervasive repatriation that is necessary. So I think the prospect of collapse is something to pay attention to. It is something to be anticipated. Well, in its own sake, for its own sake, it's something to anticipate. But I think it will have very significant political implications. What I hope I've shown here through this ridiculous report from this bright blue organisation is how that collapse happens, how the tax and spend ratchet goes up again and again and again until it breaks the system, and then the system collapses. And what we are seeing there with that report is that collapse mechanism in operation. Thank you.